My mother used to say I was just like my father, not in a loving way, but like a curse. I spent most of my life thinking if I stayed quiet, if I worked hard, if I made myself small enough, maybe she'd finally love me. Instead, she showed up to my engagement party just to tell people I'd never be good enough, not even for the man who wanted to marry me. And that was the moment everything broke. I used to think all moms were like mine. That behind every suburban front door, there was a woman like her, standing in the kitchen, holding a coffee cup like a weapon, with that sharp, casual cruelty that could gut you before breakfast. It wasn't until much later, university, actually, that I started to realize that what I lived through wasn't normal. That not every child flinched when their mom walked into the room. That not everyone avoided mirrors because they couldn't bear to see what their mother saw. My name's Emily. I'm 31 now, and I've spent most of my life trying to shrink myself small enough to survive my mother's gaze. And before anyone says she probably meant well, let me stop you right there. My mother didn't mean well. She meant power, control. And for years, I gave it to her without realizing that's what she was doing. My dad left when I was 5. One night he was there, the next morning his side of the closet was empty. No note. No goodbye. Just gone. I don't remember his face anymore, just the feeling of space where he used to be. My mother never spoke his name after that. Not once. But I saw it in the way she looked at me. I had his round face. His light hair. His eyes. Every time she looked at me, it was like she was seeing a ghost she wanted to exorcise. And so she did. Bit by bit. Word by word. When I was 7, I reached for a second cookie. She said, "Another? You can barely fit through the door." In front of guests, they laughed. I don't think I've ever really eaten comfortably since. When I was 9, I won a writing contest at school. She read my story and said, "Do people really get paid for this kind of thing?" I told her I wanted to be an author someday. She said, "Wanting doesn't make it so." When I was 12, she caught me trying on lipstick. Her comment, "Try makeup all you want. It won't fix what's underneath." She never screamed. She didn't have to. Her words always came softly, like friendly advice. Like she was doing me a favor. That's what makes it worse, honestly. The subtlety of it. The gaslight flavor of, "I'm just helping," that leaves you wondering if maybe you really are the problem. I spent most of my teenage years hiding in my room. I stopped going to birthday parties. I wore layers, even in summer. I skipped lunch at school. I started scribbling poems and sketching characters in the margins of my homework, strong, bold women who stood up for themselves. Women I could never be. My friends noticed something was off, but I was good at deflecting. "She's just strict. She's under a lot of stress. She loves me. She just shows it differently." I believed that last one for way too long. When I finally got accepted to a university out of state, mercifully, my mother's response was, "I hope they have diet plans there." I told myself that was her way of showing excitement. That night, I packed alone in silence. I cried into a pillow so she wouldn't hear. The day I left for school, she didn't hug me. She handed me a list of suggestions for improvement and said, "Try not to embarrass yourself." I taped that list to the back of my dorm closet door. Not as motivation, but as proof. Proof that it wasn't in my head. That I wasn't imagining it. What I didn't know then was that the moment I stepped onto that campus, I was already starting to become someone else. Someone freer. Someone who would, one day, write her mother a letter that would change everything. But that's a long way off. Right now, I was just a scared freshman in a too-big hoodie, hiding in the back of lecture halls and hoping no one looked too closely. Then Ryan noticed me. College felt like breathing for the first time after years of holding my breath. I didn't have to listen for footsteps in the hallway or worry about the volume of my voice, or whether I looked too much like him today. No one here knew me. No one here knew her. The dorm was loud, chaotic in that college freshman kind of way, music playing down the hall, people yelling over video games, someone crying in the laundry room because they shrunk their favorite shirt. But that noise? It was safe. It wasn't threatening. I'd take it any day over the cold hush of my mother's house. I kept to myself, mostly. My roommate was one of those girls who made friends in 5 seconds flat and invited people over constantly. I didn't mind. It gave me cover. I could be invisible in plain sight. I went to classes. I sketched during lectures. I ate alone, always in the corner of the dining hall, earbuds in, pretending to watch something on my phone. No one really talked to me, not in any meaningful way, until Ryan. He sat next to me in Intro to Psych. 3rd row. Tuesday and Thursday mornings. The first few weeks, we didn't talk at all. Then one day, he leaned over and said, "You draw in the margins of your notebook like it's your job." I looked up, confused. People usually didn't comment on what I did, and definitely not with interest. I froze, instinctively ready for sarcasm or judgment. But he was just smiling. Not that smug smile people wear when they're about to be cruel. This was soft, curious, real. I gave a small shrug. It keeps me from falling asleep. He chuckled. "You should show them off. They're good." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say no, they're not, that they're just doodles, that he didn't know what he was talking about because my mother's voice was already in my head, whispering all the reasons I should stay small. But instead I just said, "Thanks." From that day, he started sitting next to me on purpose. We'd walk to the student union after class and talk about nothing, the weird psych professor, the kid who always asked too many questions, how the vending machine never stocked the good chips. It was light, easy, normal. I wasn't used to normal. One day, he caught me sketching a scene from a story I'd been writing since high school. He tilted his head, watching as I shaded the edge of a character's cloak. "What's her name?" he asked. I blinked. Mara. She looks like she doesn't take crap from anyone." I almost laughed. "Yeah, she doesn't." He leaned back in his chair. "Sounds like someone I'd want on my side." I stared at him for a second too long, unsure how to process the feeling blooming in my chest. Warm, unfamiliar, terrifying. He wasn't just being nice. He was seeing me. Not the edited, watered-down version. Me. Ryan never pushed. He never pried. But he started showing up, casually at first, then consistently. Coffee after class. Study sessions where he'd bring snacks and complain about his econ homework. Movie nights with his friends where he'd always save me a seat. And slowly, I started showing up too. I started wearing colors other than gray. I started laughing without checking if anyone was watching. I even went to a party once. I only stayed for an hour, but it felt like climbing Everest. He never commented on it. Never praised me for coming out of my shell or whatever. He just made space for me to be comfortable. That was the difference. One rainy afternoon, we were sitting in the corner of the campus cafe, our laptops open but long since abandoned. He was telling me a ridiculous story about his older brother trying to become a magician. I was actually smiling, like real smiling, when he paused and looked at me. "Emily," he said, serious all of a sudden. "You know you don't have to laugh at my jokes, right?" I raised an eyebrow. "Why wouldn't I?" He shrugged. "I just want to make sure you know. You don't owe anyone that." That one sentence hit me like a punch in the gut. I didn't realize until that moment how much of my life had been performative. How often I'd smiled, nodded, agreed, just to keep the peace. Just to avoid the sting of being wrong or ungrateful or too much. I looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "Thank you." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. That's when I knew Ryan was different. He wasn't just a guy I liked. He was safe. But even with all of that, I hadn't told him about my mom. Not really. He asked once, gently, "Do you talk to your family much?" I shrugged. Not really. My mom's complicated. It was the only word I could manage without unraveling. He didn't press. He just said, "Okay," and handed me another sugar packet for my tea like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was starting to believe maybe I could have a life outside of the one I came from. But that's the thing about abusers, they can sense when they're losing control. And my mother? She was about to make her presence known again. By the time spring semester rolled around, Ryan and I were inseparable, not in a clingy, obsessive way, but in that steady, grounding kind of closeness that makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, life can be safe. Predictable even. In a good way. He never asked for details, but he could sense it, the way I tensed when someone raised their voice, even in a joke. How I flinched when people teased each other, like I was waiting for the punch to land on me. I never told him why I didn't like mirrors or why compliments made me squirm. But he pieced it together in small, quiet ways. One afternoon, we were walking back from class and he said, almost offhand, "I hope you know it's okay to like yourself, Emily. You don't need anyone's permission." I remember stopping in the middle of the sidewalk. Not because of the words, but because no one had ever said that to me before, not once in my entire life. He noticed the way I froze and didn't ask me to explain. He just slipped his hand into mine and kept walking. That was Ryan. And then right when I started to let my guard down, right when I started to believe this was the life I could have, the email came. Subject line: dinner on Sunday? Sender: Mom. I stared at it for a full 10 minutes before opening it. The message was short, blunt, her usual tone. Haven't seen you in a while. Come home for dinner Sunday. Bring your boyfriend if you must. I felt my chest tighten instantly. I hadn't been home since I'd left for school. We'd spoken a few times, short calls where she asked surface-level questions like, "Are you eating?" which didn't mean what it sounded like, or "Do you have a job yet?" I avoided the calls more often than not. Texts were easier. I could filter, edit, lie. I showed the message to Ryan. He read it, handed the phone back, and asked gently, "Do you want to go?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Do you feel like you should?" That one hit. I didn't want to go. But the guilt? The obligation? That childhood script that said she's your mother played in my head like a siren. I sighed. I don't want her to think I'm hiding from her. We ended up going. I told myself I needed closure. That maybe, with Ryan there, she'd be different. More civil. That his presence would buffer the worst of it. Deep down, I think I just wanted him to see her. We drove 2 hours to the house I'd grown up in. It looked exactly the same, cream siding, dying hedges, the porch light that always flickered but never got replaced. The moment we stepped inside, I felt 13 again. My skin itched with invisible bruises. She didn't hug me, just gave me a once-over and said, "You've gained weight." College food, huh? Ryan blinked. I laughed nervously. He reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed it like a lifeline. Dinner was roast chicken, overcooked vegetables, and undercooked resentment. She asked Ryan about his major, his plans, his family. She didn't ask me a single question. Then came the comment. She looked at him, deadpan, and said, "You must have terrible eyesight." Ryan frowned. "Excuse me." To pick her, she added, gesturing toward me with her fork. "You're either blind or very generous." The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan didn't say anything right away. He didn't yell or storm out. He just set his fork down and looked her in the eye. "You must be very unhappy," he said quietly. Her smile faltered. "Excuse me." He stood up, reached for my hand again, and said, "We're leaving." I didn't argue. I didn't even look back. We didn't talk much during the drive back. I was shaking the entire time. Not from fear, from the adrenaline of someone finally standing up for me. From the realization that I never had before. Ryan pulled into the parking lot and turned to me. "Is she always like that?" I nodded, trying not to cry. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be," he replied. "You didn't deserve any of that." And for the first time in my life, I almost believed it. For days after the dinner, I felt like I'd been unplugged from reality. Like I was floating just a few inches above my life, watching it happen without really being in it. I'd replay that moment in the dining room over and over again, my mother's smirk, Ryan's quiet fury, the sound of my own silence. I didn't say anything, Not one word. I just let it happen. Like always. Ryan didn't bring it up at first. I think he knew I needed space to process it, but I could tell it weighed on him. There was a new tension in how he looked at me, not toward me, but around me, like he was seeing shadows I'd learned to ignore. A week later, he finally asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" We were in his apartment, sitting on the floor with takeout between us. I picked at my noodles and shrugged. "What's there to talk about?" "You saw it." "I did," he said. And it made me really angry. I looked at him. At her. He hesitated. At her, yes. But also at how normal it seemed to you. That stung. Not because he was wrong, but because he was exactly right. "I used to think she was just tough," I said slowly. "Like, no nonsense. Old school. That kind of thing. But it's more than that. It's like everything about me is a disappointment to her. And somehow I started believing I deserved it." Ryan didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "You don't." I nodded, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. "I know. At least I think I know. Some days it feels true. Other days, it still feels like I'm the problem." He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "You're not the problem, Em. You never were." That night, I checked my phone. No message from my mom. No apology. No follow-up. Just silence. At first, I was furious. After everything, after humiliating me in front of someone I loved, she didn't even feel the need to explain herself? But then I realized she never had. Not when she told me I looked like a before photo in a weight loss ad. Not when she mocked my poems at the 8th grade talent show. Not when she threw away my sketchbook and said, "Focus on things that matter." She never apologized because in her world, she was never wrong. I tried to write her an email that night. Something short. Maybe even civil. Just to say, "You crossed a line." But as I stared at the blank screen, my fingers froze. Because I knew how she'd respond. If she responded at all. "You're too sensitive. Learn to take a joke. You always make everything about you." So I closed my laptop. I didn't block her. I didn't send a message. I just stopped trying. And for a while, that felt like enough. Until she found a new way to break back in. The first sign that things weren't over came a few weeks later. Ryan's mom, Jane, had invited us over for a casual Sunday lunch, nothing fancy, just her way of staying connected now that Ryan and I were getting more serious. Jane was everything my mom wasn't. Warm. Curious in a genuine, non-invasive way. She had a slow, calming voice and always made extra food, just in case, even when there were only 4 people expected. That day, I was nervous. I liked her. A lot. And part of me still didn't know what it was like to be liked back by someone's mother. She set a plate of warm apple pie in front of me and said, "Ryan tells me you write." That's incredible. I waited for the but. For the eye roll. For the dig. But it never came. She just smiled like she actually meant it. And I, like an idiot, let myself relax. We were halfway through coffee when Jane suddenly looked confused and said, "Emily, I meant to ask. I got a strange call last week. A woman named Laura. Said she was your mother." My heart dropped. "What?" I asked too quickly. "She said she wanted to introduce herself," Jane said slowly. "Said she thought it was important to connect with Ryan's family." Well, I didn't know what to say. Ryan's fork hit his plate a little too hard. "She what?" Jane looked from me to him. "She was very insistent. Asked if we could meet for lunch sometime. Just her and us. Said she had concerns." I felt my body go cold. "She never mentioned this to me," I muttered. "She's never reached out to anyone I dated. Ever." Jane touched my hand gently. I didn't want to overstep. I told her I'd think about it. But honestly, I got a weird feeling. Like she wasn't really asking, she was making sure I knew she existed. I wanted to disappear. The one part of my life that had felt untouched, uninfected by her, was now being pulled into her orbit. Ryan was livid. "She's trying to control the narrative. She wants to plant doubts before we get too close. She always does, I whispered. She always makes it about her. And the worst part? I could already imagine what she said to Jane. Emily's sensitive. She's not used to normal families. She gets dramatic sometimes, especially with men. It didn't matter what the exact words were. I knew the tone. The fake concern cadence. The way she could play the worried parent while smearing me in every sentence. I didn't cry until we got back to Ryan's place. Then it hit me all at once, the violation of it. The sheer audacity. Reaching into my relationship, uninvited, with that smug belief that she still had some right to define who I was. Ryan held me while I sobbed on his couch. I'll call my mom, he said. I'll explain everything. No, I said through the tears. She'll believe you. I don't want to have to explain who I am to everyone because of her. But in that moment, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't going to go away quietly. Not this time. Jane never did meet with my mother. After our talk, she sent a kind but firm text thanking her for reaching out and politely declining the lunch. She said something about wanting to respect boundaries and that any future contact should go through me directly. I nearly cried when I read it. That should have been the end of it. But with my mother, there's always a second act. The next incident came in the form of a family dinner. My mother called it that in a group message, one of her dramatic, passive-aggressive ways of declaring something was important. She invited a few aunts and uncles, a couple cousins, and me. Just me, not Ryan. When I told her I wouldn't come unless Ryan was included, she said, "This isn't about him, Emily. It's about our family." I stared at that message for a long time, heart thudding, before replying, "Then it's not about me either. I won't be there." She left me on read. For 2 days. Then came another message, this time just to me. "It's rude to reject an invitation to your own family's table. You're not too good for us, Emily. You're just easy to forget." I showed it to Ryan without saying a word. He looked at it, sighed, and then just said, "Do you want me to come with you anyway?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how to, because I didn't want to go. But part of me still felt like if I skipped it, I was proving her right, that I was too fragile, too dramatic, too much. So I went. I wore a plain black dress, tied my hair back, and told myself I'd keep quiet, sit near the end of the table, and leave early. Just show my face. Keep the peace. Ryan came too, despite not being on the original invite. He held my hand the whole walk to the door. The moment we stepped in, I could feel it. The air wasn't just cold, it was sharp, judging, calculated. The kind of tension that clings to your skin and whispers, "Don't speak too loud. Don't take up space." My mom greeted us like a hostess at a country club, plastic smile, arms barely opening. "Oh, you brought Ryan." I nodded. "Yes, I told you we're a package deal." She didn't respond, just turned and walked into the dining room. We sat at the far end. Ryan next to me. I said hello to the cousins I hadn't seen in years. A few were warm, a few looked uncomfortable. No one mentioned the tension hanging in the room like smoke. Dinner was a slow-motion disaster. My mom narrated the evening like she was on stage, boasting about promotions, throwing digs at other relatives' decisions masked as advice, constantly shifting the spotlight. She barely looked at me. Until dessert. I'd passed on the pie. I was feeling nauseous from the stress. That's when she dropped it. "Oh, look," she said, loud enough for the whole table. Emily's back in her camouflage again. Black dress, no makeup, no personality. A few people chuckled awkwardly. Ryan didn't. He put his fork down slowly and said, "That's enough." Everyone froze. My mother raised her eyebrows, amused. "Excuse me. You don't get to talk to her like that," he said calmly. "This is my home," she replied. "Then maybe try acting like a host instead of a heckler," Ryan said, without raising his voice. Silence. Utter silence. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "Thank you for dinner. We're leaving." Ryan stood with me. No one stopped us. No one said a word. As we walked out, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt something different. Done. The car ride home was quiet. Not the kind of awkward silence that comes after a fight, but the deep, settled kind that follows something long overdue. I was looking out the window, watching the lights blur past, and for the first time in years, I felt clarity. Like a fog had lifted, and I could finally see what I'd been living through for what it really was. Ryan kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting gently on my knee. He didn't push me to talk. He just drove, letting the silence stretch into something that felt like safety. When we got back to his place, he turned off the engine, but didn't move. "You okay?" I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say I was fine. But the truth is, I felt like I'd been broken open, not in a loud, explosive way, but like a crack in a wall that had been there for years and finally gave way under pressure. I nodded, swallowing hard. I think I'm finally seeing her clearly. And I don't like what I see. Ryan leaned his head back against the seat. "I'm sorry you had to grow up with that. I don't know how you survived it." I let out a small laugh, but it wasn't funny. You get good at pretending. You learn which parts of yourself to hide and which lies will keep you safe. And eventually, you forget what the truth even looks like. He turned to me, his voice soft. "You don't have to hide anymore, not with me." And that's when I broke. The tears came hard and fast, years of swallowed emotion spilling out all at once. Ryan pulled me into his arms, holding me while I sobbed into his hoodie, shaking with grief I didn't even know I'd been carrying. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about every birthday I spent dreading her mood. Every school performance where she never clapped. Every time I got dressed and heard her voice in my head before I even saw myself in the mirror. All of it was catching up to me now, like my body had finally decided it couldn't keep carrying the weight alone. When I finally pulled back, my face was puffy and my throat hurt. "I think she's always been like that," I whispered. I just never let myself believe it. I kept thinking if I tried harder, she'd be different. That if I was thinner, or quieter, or more accomplished, she'd love me the right way. That night, I had a dream. I was back in my childhood home, but it was dark, every light off, every window sealed. I was trying to open a door that wouldn't budge, calling for someone who never answered. Then Ryan appeared in the dream, holding a flashlight. He didn't open the door for me. He just stood beside me and handed me the light. And I woke up crying again, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the sudden, sharp knowledge that maybe, for the first time in my life, I had the power to walk away. After the dinner, I didn't call my mother. I didn't text. I didn't reach out to smooth things over like I used to. She wasn't going to apologize. She never had. Days turned into a week. Then 2. For the first time in my life, I was testing what it felt like to simply not engage. Then, one afternoon, a package arrived at Ryan's place. It was from her. I knew immediately by the handwriting. The sharp, slanted script that looked like it had been etched, not written. There was no return address, just my name and a piece of masking tape over the seal. I didn't open it at first. I just stared at it for a long time, my chest tightening with dread. Ryan walked in and saw me frozen on the couch. "What is it?" I held it up wordlessly. He sat beside me. "You don't have to open it." But I did. I had to know what game she was playing now. Inside the box was a photo album. Old, worn, bound with string. And inside? Torn photos. Photos of me as a child, holding my father's hand, writing on his shoulders, sitting on his lap. Every single one had been defaced. Black marker scrawled across the images. My face circled with cruel words scribbled beside it. "You'll never escape what you come from. Is this your ideal man? This is who you look like." At the very back of the album was a single page with one sentence written in bold, angry strokes. "So you don't forget who you are." I couldn't breathe. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was stunned. Hollow. Like someone had just thrown open a door in the middle of a storm and the cold came rushing in. Ryan took the album out of my hands gently and closed it. Then he looked at me, not with pity, not with anger, but with something deeper. Something protective. Something calm. Just like that, something shifted. Not everything. Not overnight. But enough. Enough to know I was going to write her back. And this time, it wouldn't be an apology. I'd always imagined that when I finally stood up to my mother, it would be loud. Explosive. A screaming match, maybe years of anger pouring out all at once, fueled by everything I never said when I should have. But when the moment actually came, it was quiet. I sat at Ryan's kitchen table, the torn photo album beside me, and stared at a blank document on my laptop. For hours. The cursor blinked like a dare. I didn't know where to start. How do you speak to someone who never listened? How do you confront someone who's spent your whole life convincing you that confrontation means you're ungrateful? Ryan came in halfway through, placed a cup of tea beside me, and said, "You don't have to make it perfect. You just have to make it true." So I stopped trying to be clever or composed. I stopped trying to say things in a way that might earn her understanding. I wrote it like I was finally speaking for the girl I used to be, the one who often cried in her closet. Here's part of what I wrote. You've spent your entire life trying to make me feel small. And for a long time, it worked. You chipped away at me piece by piece, with comments disguised as jokes and critiques disguised as concern. You called it raising me. I call it what it was, control through cruelty. You couldn't let go of your own pain, so you poured it into me, drop by drop, until I stopped recognizing my own reflection. You didn't break me in one blow. You broke me slowly. Quietly. That's the kind of damage people don't notice until it's too late. But I noticed. I see it now. And I'm done. I'm not writing this to ask for anything. Not your apology. Not your love. I don't need either anymore. I'm writing this to say I forgive you, because I won't carry the weight of your hatred any longer. But I won't let you into my life again. You don't get to meet me halfway when you've never taken a single step in my direction. I'm not your scapegoat. I'm not your punching bag. I'm not the little girl in the hallway begging for a kind word that never comes. I'm someone now. I matter. And I will not allow you to undo that. I printed it, folded it, put it in an envelope, and sent it by mail. No ceremony. No drama. Just the truth, finally spoken. The next few days felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Part of me expected her to show up at my door. Another part feared I'd get no response at all. But instead, something else happened. I got peace. Not the fake peace of keeping quiet to avoid conflict. The real kind. The kind that comes from saying, "This ends here." With me. I didn't know what she'd do next. But I knew what I would. I would live. On my terms. The engagement party felt like a dream. The good kind. The kind I never thought I'd be allowed to have. It was the first time in my life where everyone in the room seemed genuinely happy for me. Not performative. Not jealous. Just warm, messy, human love. Jane's backyard glowed under soft lights. Ryan's sisters helped string fairy lights through the trees. His little cousin set up a table with handmade name cards. People clinked glasses, laughed loudly, danced barefoot on the grass. For once, I wasn't bracing for impact. I wasn't waiting for someone to ruin it. Until the knock at the door. Ryan opened it, and I saw her, my mother, standing there in a powder blue jacket and holding a bouquet of cheap carnations. Everything in me clenched. I didn't want her there. But something old and hardwired whispered in my chest, "Don't be afraid." She had come. Maybe she would behave. Maybe, for once, she would see what this meant to me and act accordingly. "Let her in," I said quietly. Ryan looked at me for a long moment, then stepped aside. She walked in like she owned the place, smiled tightly, and handed me the flowers. "You look healthy," she said. A backhanded compliment, but said in a polite enough tone to pass in front of strangers. I nodded, forced a smile, and guided her toward the drinks table. She charmed people, as always. Told Jane she looked far too young to have grown children. Asked polite questions about the food. Even made a little joke that made one of Ryan's aunts laugh. She was good. Practiced. A performance honed over years of hiding knives in silk. For a while, everything seemed fine. I started to believe maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe she just wanted to make peace. Ryan watched me from across the yard. He didn't smile. As the evening wore on, some guests started to wander outside, catching the cool night air, drinks in hand, laughter floating on the breeze. I stayed back with Ryan, laughing about something his sister had said, until I noticed he wasn't laughing anymore. His gaze had drifted toward the edge of the yard. And then I saw it. A small circle of chairs tucked beneath the arbor in the garden. Jane, her 2 daughters, and my mother. At first, I thought she was telling some charming story. Her voice had that lilting, sweet cadence she used when she wanted to play innocent. But then I got closer, and I heard the words. "She's always been like this," my mother was saying, her voice dripping with false sorrow. "Ungrateful. Just like her father. He walked out, and she acts like she's better than everyone now. Thinks she's someone just because she landed a decent man. But she's still that needy, clingy little girl deep down. Ryan will see it eventually. He'll run too." Ryan's mother looked uncomfortable. One of his sisters glanced at the ground. The other looked toward me, and her eyes widened when she realized I was standing there. So did my mother's. I didn't move. Not yet. But something inside me had. This time, I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to run. Next time, I would speak. I stood at the edge of the garden, frozen. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I wasn't scared. Not in the way I used to be. Not in that panicked, shrinking, little girl way. This time, it was something else. Resolve. The table under the arbor had gone completely silent. My mother's voice had cut off mid-sentence when she saw me. Ryan stepped up behind me, his hand hovering at my back, not pushing, just reminding me he was there. I took a slow breath and walked forward. No one moved. I stopped just behind the chairs, where all 4 women could see me clearly. My mother opened her mouth, probably to lie, to pivot, to act like she was just misunderstood. I didn't let her. "Get out," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Emily." I said get out. I repeated, louder. "You don't belong here." Jane stood, her face pale, lips parted in shock. Her daughters followed suit quickly. My mother remained seated, her expression shifting from surprise to indignation. "You're making a scene," she said, calmly, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Don't talk to me like I'm a child," I snapped. "You've talked about me behind my back my whole life, but doing it at my engagement party, to the mother of the man I love?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's a new low. Even for you." She rolled her eyes. "I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You called me ungrateful," I said. "Said I'm just like my father. Said Ryan will leave me." Her face hardened. "Well, he should know what he's getting into." "He knows exactly what he's getting into," I said. "Which is more than I can say for anyone who's ever tried to love you." There it was. The first time I'd ever said anything like that out loud. And it felt like breathing. "You don't know what you're saying," she hissed. "You're upset." "No," I said. "Not upset. Done." She blinked. I took one step closer, my voice steady now. "I am done pretending you haven't hurt me. I am done shrinking every part of myself to make space for your bitterness. I am done letting your voice live in my head like it belongs there. You don't get to rewrite who I am just because you hate your own reflection." She stood now too, but there was a tremor in her movements. "I gave you everything," she said. "You gave me fear," I replied. "You gave me shame. You gave me an eating disorder, a warped sense of worth, and many years of believing I was unlovable. But you know what else you gave me?" I turned slightly and glanced at Ryan. "You gave me the fire to walk away. To finally build a life that looks nothing like yours." No one said anything. Not Jane. Not her daughters. Not even my mother. So I turned and walked away. I didn't wait to see if she followed. I didn't care. She had no power here anymore. When I stepped back into the house, the laughter was still there, a little softer, a little cautious, but still alive. A few people looked over, unsure of what had just happened outside. Jane followed me in a moment later, and whatever questions lingered, no one asked them. Ryan came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and whispered, "I'm proud of you." I leaned into him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was performing strength. I actually felt it. But when the last guest left and the lights came down and the house finally went quiet, it hit me. The grief. It didn't come in loud sobs or dramatic gasps. It came in waves of silence. Sitting on Jane's couch with a blanket over my lap, fingers tracing the edge of my glass, I felt it settle deep in my chest. Ryan sat beside me, waiting. I meant every word I said. "But why does it still hurt?" He nodded. "Because part of you still hoped it would be different." I didn't respond. He was right. I wanted her to show up and behave like a mother. I wanted her to pull me aside, apologize, say she was proud, maybe even cry. I wanted one moment of soft, one shred of decency, one damn second where I didn't have to be on guard. But she didn't come to support me. She came to poison the water. "She doesn't love me," I said quietly. "She doesn't know how to," Ryan replied. And that stung more than I expected. Not because it was harsh, but because it was the truth I had run from for years. I thought about all the birthdays I spent waiting for affection that never came. All the school plays, the report cards, the trophies she dismissed with a wave of her hand. I thought about the torn photos, the words written in permanent marker, the way she had talked about me like I was nothing more than a burden, even to strangers. And still, I had wanted her to love me. It was humiliating, the depth of that desire, but also so deeply human. "I feel pathetic," I whispered. Ryan gently turned my face toward his. "You're not. You're someone who tried harder than most people ever would. You survived things that would have broken others. And you still showed up until you didn't have to anymore." I rested my head on his shoulder and let the silence hold us. That night, I didn't cry myself to sleep. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And strangely, I wasn't afraid. I didn't feel lost. I felt free. Not the kind of freedom you post about online. The quiet kind. The kind that comes after choosing yourself, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The week after the confrontation felt quiet. Unnervingly quiet. No texts. No voicemails. No pop-up visits or half-hearted apologies. Just silence from my mother, the kind I used to beg for, but now didn't quite know what to do with. I kept waiting for the guilt to flood back in, for that old anxiety to creep in through the cracks. But it didn't. Not like before. Instead, I started feeling something else, the unfamiliar tug of relief. Ryan stayed close that week. Not hovering, not smothering, just there. We went for walks, cooked lazy breakfasts, watched bad movies. I drew again. He kept checking in, gently, without pressure. "You're doing better," he said one morning as I watered the plants on our windowsill. I looked at him. "I think I am." He nodded. "You'll keep getting better too." "What happened? It didn't break you, Em. It made you stronger." "I'm proud of you." That made me cry, not the sad kind, but the kind that comes when someone says exactly what you didn't know you needed to hear. A few days later, Jane called. She asked if it would be okay if she and Ryan's sisters came up a little early before the wedding. "We'd just like to be there," she said. "I think you could use a few extra people who love you around right now." I said yes before I even finished thinking about it. They arrived late on a Friday afternoon. Jane brought a casserole and a smile. Ella and Megan carried bags and homemade place cards for the rehearsal dinner. Drew had 2 cases of sparkling water and a goofy grin. But before they even took off their coats, Jane handed me a small, carefully wrapped box. Inside was a handcrafted wooden sculpture of a tree, its trunk wide and sturdy, its branches carved into delicate arcs, and beneath the roots, etched in smooth script, it read, "Family is who holds you when you choose yourself." It was simple, beautiful, and I couldn't stop touching the engraving. "We had it made last week," Jane said softly. "We wanted you to know, you don't have to carry that pain alone anymore. You're ours now if you'll have us." I couldn't speak. My throat closed up, and I just nodded, holding the sculpture to my chest like it was a lifeline. That night, we had a quiet family dinner. Not dramatic, not formal, just roasted chicken, potatoes, wine, laughter that wasn't sharp around the edges. Ryan's siblings told childhood stories that made me snort with laughter. Jane kept patting my hand and smiling like it was second nature. And at one point, she said, "You're one of us, Emily. You've been through hell and you still show up with grace. That matters. You matter." Something inside me loosened. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone recovering from a wound. I felt like someone building a life. It's strange, looking back. If you told me even a year ago that I'd be here, engaged to someone who sees me, truly sees me, standing in front of a mirror and not flinching, setting hard boundaries and not apologizing for them, I wouldn't have believed you. Not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't know I deserved it. That's what emotional abuse does to you. It sneaks in through the cracks and builds itself a home in your mind. It doesn't scream, it whispers. "You're overreacting. You're ungrateful. You're the problem." For years, I swallowed those messages like truth. I bent myself into something smaller, quieter, more palatable. I became a daughter who took the blame, who accepted cruelty as concern, who mistook endurance for love. But here's what I know now. Love doesn't humiliate you. Love doesn't twist your reflection into something shameful. Love doesn't keep score. Love, real love, holds space for your humanity. It shows up when you're at your worst and reminds you of your worth. It doesn't try to break you so you'll stay. It builds with you so you'll grow. Ryan showed me that. So did Jane and Ella and Megan and Drew. So did my own heart, once I stopped muting it to make room for hers. It took one ugly, brutal confrontation for me to finally choose myself. And no, it wasn't easy. It was terrifying. There's a kind of grief in cutting off someone who raised you, even when they've hurt you, especially when they've hurt you. Because you're not just losing a person, you're letting go of a lifelong hope that they'd someday become what you needed. But that grief? It passes. And what it leaves behind is space. Space to heal. Space to build. Space to finally exist without editing yourself for someone else's comfort. If you're reading this and you've been there, if you're still living under someone else's thumb, if you're still waiting for love to come wrapped in pain, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me. You don't have to earn decency. You are not broken just because someone broke you. You are not difficult for wanting to be treated with kindness. And no matter what they said, you are not unlovable. I was once a girl who believed I had to be smaller to be safe. Now, I take up space. And I'm never giving it back. Emily.